Welcome back for a new review, and this is a new console review, and I thought since the Super Nintendo Classic came out, I thought what better time to review the original Super Nintendo. And I hope you enjoy the music in the background from Street Fighter II, and also the original Killer Instinct in honor. But as said, yeah, the original Super Nintendo, which will actually play Super Famicom. All you have to do is do augments here in order to fit the cartridges in. But that's it. Very simple design, as you say. Basic reset, power, and of course, better yet, as an example, then one of the true classics of beat-em-ups, Final Fight, which would introduce, of course, Hagar, and many other future beloved characters, which would end up in, of course, the Street Fighter games. And you can't beat the classic. But honestly, this truly was a great console. Back at the time when Super Nintendo came out, this was a symbol of greatness for great quality. But Super Nintendo would end up released around a year after, of course, the Sega Genesis, and would begin the 16-bit wars. As we see the basic front design, of course. Overall, very simple design for the most part. We have a few adjustment things here and there. And it says, well, sadly. But overall, it was very basic for the most part. Like anything else, your power plug, of course. Also, you had two different plug-ins. Originally, when this came out, of course, the type of plug-in you would have to use in back at TVs would actually be one of these ugly things, which usually you would plug in this to the back of your TV. And then you would plug in, or you could plug this into the back of your VHS VCR and then have the other cord plug into this side. But yeah, this is what we used for a long time when I was a kid. This was the kind of plug-in I used for my Super Nintendo. Of course, later on, as time progressed, of course, they would change and get AV, which would get, of course, a little bit better quality sound overall than the old plugins. Plus, this is basically the only way you can play these classic consoles on current TVs of nowadays. And overall, really, it's a classic console of its time. Of course, my first actual console was the Sega Genesis, but still, this has an incredible library of games. I dare say, in my opinion, this is still, to the day, the best Nintendo console ever released, in my personal opinion. I don't think, in my view anyways, that there will ever be another, like, Super Nintendo type console from Nintendo. I mean, next to this, in my view, the N64 is probably the second best Nintendo console ever made. For me, anyways. Then it's kind of a toss-up with maybe the GameCube. But, now sadly, my old original Super Nintendo controller died over here, so I had to get of course, just a duplicate or whatever, but it does its job, and actually it works pretty well for the most part, except for not having a classic Nintendo right there. But it still gets the job done, and it works good, honestly, for being an off-brand, I'm actually surprised at how good it does work. But it is your classic basic design from the time period with your, of course, basic YX AB buttons, of course, your start select, classic D-pad, and this really was the first control of its time to introduce the R and L buttons. Really, it's what would make the R and L buttons really a big importance in future video games, in all honesty. And for like 6-button fighting games, like Street Fighter, for instance. In all honesty, this really did help in fighting games, though I still dare say the 6-button design Sega Genesis controller is actually better overall for fighting games anyways, layout wise. But still, this is a really good controller design overall, as well as a great console for the amazing amounts of games honestly came out. As I mentioned, classics like Final Fight from Capcom. Sadly, then we have some really bad ones, like, in my opinion, the worst Final Fantasy game ever in history, Mystic Quest, which was basically back in the day when Square thought Westerners were too dumb to understand fighting games. Though, luckily, over the years, Square realized that Westerners actually can play RPGs. Then we get special games like this, which would have a special chip put in it in order to actually render 3D graphics. This would be really more or less the first 3D game on the market. So Star Fox really was a major leap forward, technologically speaking. We'd have classics, some of the greatest and hardest licensed platformers of all time, the Super Star Wars games, based off, of course, the original Star Wars trilogy. Super Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And we would have guilty pleasure fighting games such as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Fighting Edition, which is actually a really fun fighting game, in all honesty. Eventually, I may actually do some gameplay of this game. Let me know if you'd actually like me to do that. Of course, we would have great classics of course, action RPGs like The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, which I still, for me personally, is in the top 3, I feel, best Zelda games of all time. And easily, probably I view in the top 10 best Nintendo RPGs of all time. And then we would get some awesome collection deals, exclusive, such as Super Mario All-Stars, with, of course, Super Mario 1, 2, and 3, which are true classics, as well as, of course, obviously, Super Mario World, and many others. And, of course, in my view, the greatest fighting game of all time would be released on this console, Street Fighter II Turbo. I can't count how many times over the years that I actually play this freaking game on here. It's just ridiculous. But it had many other great fighting games as well, such as, of course, as I mentioned prior, Killer Instinct, which is, I still feel, easily one of the best fighting games from that era. One thing that gets me, though, is the size of the freaking plugins back at this time. Look how massive this thing is. Seriously. That is pretty big. Yeah. That thing weighs, seriously, a lot. But I hope you enjoyed some of this music. And I'll get ready to cut this short little walk down memory lane for me. But I hope you enjoyed this. And this is a basic retrospective on the Super Nintendo, which is easily in the top 5 greatest game consoles of all time. There's no shadow of a doubt about that one. Given its library is insanely good, some of the best fighting games of all time, some of the best RPGs of all time. Like on here, Final Fantasy III, aka Final Fantasy VI, which is regarded by many to be the best JRPG of all time, along with games like Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, great beat-em-ups like Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, or heck, how about other classics from this era? And of course, future cult classics like Earthbound, or classics like Mega Man X. Honestly, the list goes on and on for how many great games there were on this console. But I'll see you all next time for a future retrospective, and you can expect in the future another retro game console review. One that I'm actually thinking about, I'd love to hear your all's opinion on, is I've been debating whether or not to do a console review for, of course, a little console known as the PlayStation X, PSX, or PlayStation 1. But let me know, and I'll see you all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. And have a good week out there, everyone. Stay safe.